transparency, reliability, and high amount of trust. This limitation basically means that we can't access important pieces of data, such as market events and other events that we would run a Reddit contract about. This limitation, in my opinion, is what keeps our space in token land. So tokenization is the core use case of blockchains right now, and then the trading of tokens and the movement of tokens, and sometimes the voting either with tokens or on certain things related to the tokens. Now that's not an issue. It's a very good thing, and I think it's seeded our ecosystem with a lot of value that people can then use to use DeFi products and do other great things. But I think our ecosystem really has, and our technology has a lot more it can do, and it can go beyond tokenization to do something truly more valuable. And I think what it would do is it would actually grow the entire pie, such that there would actually be more need for tokenization. But you would have contracts, from the derivatives industry, the insurance industry, the trade finance industry, being put on a blockchain and being run much more effectively there, and leading those industries to eventually migrate all of their contracts onto the smart contract infrastructure that we're all building. And this is really the future that I think a lot of folks and folks in our space are working towards. This is the type of shift I've seen before. I've seen this shift twice now. You went from programmable money using Bitcoin multisig as its only, a feature addition to moving the Bitcoin around, to these protocol contracts where the contract was in the protocol itself. Then you went to a world where you could write the contracts. This is what Ethereum is very credited, very well respected for. And the truth is they moved the space into an entirely new version of what it could do. The limitation is that what it can do right now is really generate primarily tokens and a few other smart contract things related to tokens. And there's another shift that we really want to make towards all these real world contracts based on market events, based on insurance events, and all those events. I think that DeFi is really what this is. It's an initial beginning of this trajectory where we have people like Synthetix, Aave, BZX, Nexus Mutual, creating decentralized financial derivatives, lending, various insurance products, and these products are getting attention because they're superior in certain forms. But I think there's much, much farther to go. I think the limitations we need to overcome is we need to first understand that all of these contracts I just showed you are actually built using external systems. So they all need market prices, they all need some kind of data to prove that the contract should go to the next state, and this is the body of work that we're involved in. We're involved in how do you take smart contracts beyond tokenization and into a world where they can interact with any external system, whether that's an enterprise system, a piece of data, or a payment system, and that evolution is very important because it'll, I think, come to redefine our space. Now, we basically focus on a multitude of systems and a multitude of chains, and I'm going to quickly run through some of the key points of how we approach this problem and how we seek to solve it. So at the core of our approach is decentralization and the ability to have multiple independent nodes computing and validating data so it meets the high standards of a smart contract. The nodes that are validating that data in our case are of very high quality, and we have systems that assure their quality and that actually float information about their quality. So the more high quality a node is, the more transactions and usage it gets. We focus on high quality data and only generating the type of data that is of a sufficiently high validation to trigger a smart contract. And as well as cryptoeconomic security, where we basically use something called staking to provide a certain amount of guarantees around whether data is delivered correctly. We then apply other security approaches with a defense-in-depth kind of approach to security. That includes trusted execution environment, zero-knowledge proofs, and other approaches. We do all of this with an absolutely amazing open source community of node operators, developers, researchers, and auditors that work with us diligently to make sure that all the right inputs are included in the system and that everything is maintained at a highly secure level. And then we seek to provide all of these inputs and outputs to all the blockchains out there so that a developer can build smart contracts in whatever environment they think is optimal for them. There are certain environments optimal for one type of contract, others for other types of contracts. Generally speaking, the first category of problems we set out to solve, and at this point at a technical level seem to have done a good job at solving, is the avoidance of a centralized oracle. So you don't want to rely on thousands of nodes for a computation and then have a single node that is a point of failure, kind of breaks the whole model, breaks the whole system. All you have to do is attack that single node, and no matter how well written your contract is, it can all fail. So you basically first need to get away from centralization, which we do through decentralization and having multiple independent node operators that compute the validation of data to put it into various chains and allow it to be used by contracts. We actually seek to guarantee that this data gets delivered correctly in our system. So we don't just decentralize and validate multiple pieces of data to guarantee that the input into a contract is at a sufficiently high level. We actually require we'll soon require smart contracts to make sure that they both are using a good data source and that the Oracle operator, the Chainlink node that's giving the data to them, commits to certain conditions, and those conditions are related to payment and related to reliability. This is partly the replication scheme, a replication of what service agreements seek to do in the real world, and to contrast this with other Oracle solutions, some of them can't access paid APIs, so they have no guarantees of high quality data, and if they don't have service agreements or a capability like that on their roadmap, then it's not likely they'll be able to provide that same high level of guarantee once the data is supposed to be transported. We also apply cryptoeconomic security to this dynamic, once again, through the service agreement, which defines the conditions under which people are both paid and the conditions under which they could end up losing their deposit or stake as a node operator. And this provides an additional level of assurance that the data delivered to a contract is going to be delivered correctly, and that it's something that the contract users and developers can actually rely on the Chainlink network, the Chainlink nodes in a specific Oracle network to deliver data of a certain quality from ideally premium APIs, because they have the ability to interact with premium APIs and already do on a regular basis. Once we've decentralized the Oracle mechanism, we can reliably begin to decentralize the data level. And at that level, we have two models. One model is where data providers actually run a Chainlink node that gives them built-in signing and the ability to sign transactions into multiple blockchains with pretty much almost no development effort. Retaining their current infrastructure and methods of generating data and their entire API infrastructure. And then we have node operators that query data providers that are not yet at the level where they want to run a node. So there's a certain flexibility in being able to include the data providers that want to assure their data at a higher level of security by running a node of their own. But then you also want flexibility in that you can include data providers that don't yet want to run a node, but they do see a reason to provide data to various blockchains. And in fact, every additional blockchain that we add support for expands the universe that data providers can sell to. And that creates a virtuous cycle where a larger universe of users encourages better and better data providers. Better and better data providers and better inputs generally generate better and better applications, which creates a virtuous cycle where more and better applications create substantial justification for data providers to then say, yes, I do want to provide data into this system. A lot of this is available today. You, as a smart contract developer, can go to feeds.chain.link. You can attain very well validated data feeds from multiple aggregators that are input by extremely high quality node operators at a certain frequency and at a certain level of data quality. And so far, we've already seen this jumpstart certain launches of decentralized applications in DeFi, and allowed existing applications to either become more secure or very quickly launch additional markets because they don't have to create decentralized infrastructure. They just use decentralized infrastructure that gives them all the inputs they need for that second half of the contract that isn't the core contract itself, but is all those systems that they need to interact with. And in the case of DeFi, one of those main things is price feeds, and that's something that at this point we've done a relatively good job at providing at a high level of quality and security to DeFi applications, such that we've even now had a few people launch with us without having to build an entire decentralized infrastructure. Now, price feeds are not the only input that's important for the growth of smart contracts and their use and blockchain-based applications. So I'm very excited to announce today that we're introducing something called Chainlink VRF. Chainlink VRF is something that we've been working on for a while with with some of our academic partners and some of the most talented people in the blockchain space, to generate a source of randomness as a key input that is also verifiable. So there are a number of applications that use randomness in very meaningful ways to be able to securely exist, and it's one of those inputs that pulling that input from some other off-chain source is sometimes problematic because it's not necessarily built for a blockchain, or using all the capabilities of a blockchain to provide security to the application developer and the user. And so we're very excited to today be releasing the initial testnet version of our Chainlink VRF, and to showcase what some of the things that it can make possible. So as always, I think it's useful to understand the problem we seek to solve in this context, and that problem will begin to inform our discussion about how are we solving it, and what are the benefits of making this input the way that we are. Now, I think the first thing to do is to look at what is the use case for randomness. A very common use case is blockchain gaming. So after DeFi, blockchain gaming is probably the largest use case for blockchains right now. Blockchain gaming basically depends on users going to a smart contract that guarantees that user will be fairly treated, and whatever manipulation happens in a centralized version of that same game can't occur with the user. So for example, the creator of the contract can't manipulate money away from users that deserve to get it according to the contract's conditions. Or if there's some kind of digital good generated by the contract creator can't simply take it away from a user, right? So the guarantees of blockchain gaming are very well suited for users that want to interact with the contract, that needs to assure the user that they won't for lack of a better word, be gamed themselves. So they won't have funds stolen from them. Now, some of the most common, or maybe even the most common design pattern in blockchain gaming is the use of randomness. So randomness often generates payouts to users in cryptocurrency which they previously deposited, or it generates digital goods, or any other number of events that basically blockchain games rely on. So even in the initial version of blockchain gaming, you can see that it essentially, the contract, much like DeFi contracts, consists of two parts. It consists of the contract and the conditions of the game, and then it often consists of an input, which is the majority of the time randomness. Now, the design patterns that we see in gaming so far, blockchain gaming so far, sometimes don't deliver on the full potential and end-to-end security that DeFi is now seeking to deliver to its users through the use of highly reliable oracles. One of the dynamics that I think it's worth mentioning, that in certain scenarios, the creator of the blockchain game also runs the random number generation service. So on the one hand, the smart contract and the conditions of the game, and possibly the ownership of digital goods, is on a blockchain and therefore not gameable, but the random number generation that determines the amount or the value or the relationship between that contract and the user and the cryptocurrency they put into that contract is controlled by the game's creator. Now, this leads to not the certainty, but the unfortunate possibility that there is a chance that the game's creator could have the same problems, either by having his service compromised by an adversary, or by compromising it themselves, or whatever collection of problems that might occur. You are once again sitting relatively close to centralized games where one of the key inputs is still in the control of the operator. And this is the core issue, that providing a verifiable source of randomness that can't be gamed, and it is outside the control of any interested party, such as a player or even the creator of the game, provides an additional set of guarantees to users. Now, one of the ways that people sometimes seek to solve this, and we're just going to go through a few possible solutions to see how some of them don't necessarily achieve the outcome we want, is they occasionally seek to use an external random number generator and put it on chain through an oracle. Now, this is an approach that we've seen and some folks have taken, and the limitation for a decentralized Oracle system in this context is that a random number generator fundamentally needs to create random numbers. So the various oracles that would query it wouldn't get the same result. And so sometimes people find themselves using a random number generation service and some kind of oracle mechanism possibly made by somebody else. This, unfortunately, also doesn't provide the necessary level of guarantees, because now they're exposed to any kind of adversaries that gain access to the random number generator. And in the case of cryptocurrency, it's quite attractive to them because of the immutable nature of taking cryptocurrency that doesn't belong to somebody. It's much tougher to get that away from them. And so an adversary that compromises off-chain random number generator may, would be able to get the cryptocurrency that's not theirs from a contract and essentially steal it from users. Likewise, there's some additional surface area that's created by passing it through an oracle. Having a decentralized oracle going to a random number generator without any additional capabilities like Chainlink VRF has is a difficult and limiting proposition. It sometimes could even increase surface area. Likewise, some people seek to use the properties and the data already on chain or the data generated by a blockchain to generate the randomness they need. That also creates limitations where miners could censor the outputs of a chain such that smart contracts could have something stolen from them essentially by miners. Conversely, Chainlink VRF is something that provides verifiable randomness. So what that means is that a chainlink, even a single chainlink node providing verifiable randomness, cannot be malicious. It receives a seed from the contract, and the only thing that a Chainlink VRF node can do is not respond. If it responds, the signature and the proof that it responds with based on the seed that was given to it by the contract cannot be biased, cannot be gained by the Chainlink node operator, and as long as the smart contract is built with the proper ordering for the use of randomness, you now have a source of on-chain verifiable randomness that is something that users can rely on and smart contract developers can rely on. Likewise, users can also provide seeds. So if someone is concerned that a smart contract generator or user or developer themselves is providing a seed, then users can take part in the providing of a seed by helping generate it and even using multiple seeds. So this essentially means that you have a source of randomness that's completely proven to, cryptographically proven to be unbiased, and as long as it's provided, it can be relied upon to properly settle transactions and generate digital goods and do everything that randomness needs to do on chain. The benefit of Chainlink VRF is that it's built to use the unique capabilities of blockchains to verify that proof and verify those signatures, which is something that, as far as we can tell, no other randomness generator does. The point here is that even a single Chainlink node is enough to provide these guarantees, and it once again can't be malicious. All it can really do is not provide an answer. To improve those availability guarantees, we then seek to create a system where we have more nodes and where we have multiple Chainlink nodes providing that randomness, and as that amount of Chainlink nodes grows, you have a greater and greater amount of randomness kind of availability. So the chances that any one node doesn't respond doesn't really affect the liveness, but once again, the key property of verifiable randomness is already achieved, even if only one of those nodes provides it correctly. Threshold signatures and our application of threshold signatures to create threshold VRF is something that will really help here. That's something we're working on very heavily at the moment, and we know that it's applicable to VRF as well, to basically scale up so that thousands of nodes are providing availability, even if only a portion of the nodes actually need to provide randomness or agree on, or basically send some kind of randomness into the contract. In addition to the use of smart contracts, in addition to the use of these verifiable randomness signatures and proofs, we also use staking. We will use staking to basically prove or help prove that there will be a loss for a node operator that doesn't generate the proper randomness. So there, in addition to the fact that even a single node providing this proof is providing ungameable, unbiased randomness, they will also have very strong incentives to provide this randomness consistently, and the greater the fees that users pay for the randomness, it's likely that the greater the amount of stake that node operators put up to guarantee their availability is something that would also increase. So basically, service agreements and the use of staking is also applied to Chainlink VRF to provide additional guarantees beyond the cryptographic guarantees, the availability guarantees, and now the crypto economic guarantees. This is available today. You can go on our documentation and use it on testnet today. We're still in the final stages of security review, and we seek feedback and any ideas about how this can be improved or how it can be properly used or how it can be properly improved to make sure that it applies to all the relevant use cases. One exciting example of the use cases that could benefit from this is Pool Together, and we're very lucky to be working with them as one of the initial users of Chainlink VRF. Pool Together is a no-loss savings game where it encourages people to save by generating interest that then goes to a single winner. In their case, they'll be using Chainlink VRF as one of its initial users, and we're very excited to be working with them and to be able to provide to them a verifiable source of randomness that genuinely gives them and their users assurances that their system is properly making payouts to their users, and the idea is that these assurances should increase the amount of users that use blockchain games in general and applications like Pool Together, once again making smart contracts and blockchains about something more than tokens. There are tokens obviously involved here, but the point is that blockchain gaming, with the help of a good randomness mechanism, can evolve and can grow much faster, in our opinion. This is just one of the many inputs that we're working on providing. It's one of the more exciting ones because it touches so many blockchain gaming startups and companies that we've already talked with, and we know that highly verifiable randomness is an extremely important part of how they seek to present themselves to users and how they seek to provide their guarantees. And we plan to continue providing a multitude of different inputs and outputs into various blockchains that can benefit from things like verifiable randomness, data, and payment systems, and all these other inputs and outputs. If this is something that's of interest to you as a developer or as somebody who would like to collaborate and build oracles together with us, it's a definite fact that we're looking for extremely smart, hardworking, and globally distributed people that are interested in solving this problem. We're adding members to our core team now, and we have a number of other great inputs and outputs and innovations that we're working on, both from the security point of view, the cryptographic primitive research point of view, and even just from the software development point of view. So if you're interested in these problems and you see value in helping solve them like we do, we're growing our team, and we'd be very excited to speak with you about helping take smart contracts into the next stage of their evolution. Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Hey.
Hey. Hi, Bobby. How are you?
All right. So, hi everyone. My name is Bobby. I'm the co-founder at CoinGecko. I'll be the host for the Q&A session of Foundations, Consensus Distributed. For those of you who are not aware of what we do at CoinGecko, we're the largest independent crypto data aggregator. We've been operational since 2014, and we track over 7,000 tokens from foreign exchanges. Every quarter, we publish a crypto report and have an API that is used by hundreds of top crypto projects. I've got a few questions prepared for you today, Sergey. So let's jump right straight into it.
Great.
Yeah. Congrats on the launching VRF. I'm going to ask a bit about the VRF. What's the significance of placing trustless randomness on chain? How does Chainlink approach placing randomness on chain?
So I think the significance is really that there's an entire category of applications in our ecosystem under the heading of blockchain gaming, and it's the second largest category, I think, after DeFi. And in certain cases, if you look at transaction volumes or the amount of transactions, if not the overall value, then you might even consider them the largest category. And one of the or the most important input that this category of applications needs in the form of highly reliable, verifiable, provably fair randomness is something that application development teams are struggling to build. And in my experience, when application development teams spend their time building infrastructure, it limits them and the use of their limited resources to build the best application they can. And the best, most successful DeFi development teams that we work with, they're thrilled to have an oracle mechanism that takes a certain problem off of their plate and allows them to redistribute those technical resources towards building a better user experience or application or launching more markets. So I think the significance is that if there's a piece of infrastructure that suddenly gives blockchain gaming developers back 20, 30, 40 or more % of their time because they don't have to build that infrastructure, and it also provides superior guarantees to their users and to other users that would compare their system to a centralized gaming platform of some kind, then it allows those teams to build something much better, expand what they've built, and it also allows the users that they have to grow just by virtue of being able to provide the security guarantees that smart contracts seek to provide. Because smart contracts, I think, are only as attractive as the guarantees they provide. And if the guarantees they provide require verifiable randomness, which I think in many cases in the blockchain gaming space they do, then we hope that can be a catalyst for that part of our space to grow, and to grow that collective pie that I showed before. Blockchain gaming, I think, is a substantial part of that.
Nice answer. Do you guys have any plans to have Chainlink added on other blockchains in the near future? I know you guys recently launched on Tezos, but what's the plans for other blockchains?
Yeah, we have an internal framework right now that we use to add more blockchains. We at some point plan to open that and to create some amount of incentives for blockchains to integrate with Chainlink and for people to build those integrations even in our community. We are speeding up the amount of blockchains we're integrating. So it's a delicate and complicated procedure. We're very lucky to work with the core developers of many of these chains. But I think as the amount of inputs that Chainlink provides access to, like VRF, like price data, weather data for insurance, any number of other inputs as well as outputs, I think the value of integrating Chainlink into various chains will also increase. And therefore, there will be more reason for the core developers of those chains to also see value in integrating Chainlink and to work closely with us. Right now, I think the amount of chains we're in the process of integrating or working on integrating is in the double digits, and it's going to be I think it's going to be at a faster pace as we iron out and systematize and eventually find a way to allow the community and the respective communities of each blockchain to, with a greater and greater degree of efficiency, integrate Chainlink into their chain. And then likewise, all the fees from each respective chain then contribute to the pool of fees financing the security of any one resource like Chainlink VRF, such that more fees would generally suggest that people would be willing to put up more stake to increase the guarantees, right? So more usership would generate more fees, which would generate more stake, which would generate more security for that specific for that specific input, and likewise with many of the other inputs. So I think that's actually a virtuous cycle where as you go to more chains and as you get more users, the resources of those users goes towards providing either additional nodes or additional reason for people to put up more stake, or additional or better data providers. You know, I'm very glad that CoinGecko is one of the data providers that we work with. We're very happy about that, and that's kind of I think how that evolution looks in general terms.
What's the importance of data quality in DeFi? How does Chainlink provide this high quality data?
Well, Bobby, I think you know the importance of data quality in DeFi at a very high level. I think people unfortunately assume that data aggregation and the methodologies related to providing an accurate price that covers all the exchanges that people want to cover and eliminates various categories of risks is some kind of, either they don't know about that problem, which to me suggests a serious issue. Let me put it that way. And ignoring the data quality problem is a serious issue, which I don't think that the centralized systems or hedge fund traders that use your system would do, because they are in such dynamic markets that they would experience a loss very quickly, right? I think that the nuance is that data quality is at this point slightly underappreciated, and people believe that they can maybe just make a data aggregation service by pulling from 4 or 5 exchanges, which I think, even given your experience, you know that is just riddled with multiple failures that you know of from your own experience.
Yep, all kinds of outlier issues, API going down from major exchanges, weird data coming out from all these different exchanges, so all kinds of things. Maybe we have time for one last question before we wrap this up, this Q&A. So I'm going to ask this question. Chainlink has been quite focused on crypto pricing data, but Chainlink is actually built to support all kinds of data. How has development in other forms of data been so far? What sort of data besides crypto data is showing interesting growth in the Chainlink ecosystem?
Yeah, I think the categories that I see growing, as you said, DeFi, I think we're excited to see blockchain gaming get a high quality input and start really hopefully growing more and more and expanding because of the reasons I mentioned earlier, more technical bandwidth and better guarantees to users. I think another one is insurance. So insurance is something that moves generally slowly in the world in general, but I think that insurance products are really on a next level in the blockchain ecosystem because they provide so much trust guarantees to people that are not provided by traditional insurance. And I think it's just taking time for some of it to migrate, but generally speaking, you're right that Chainlink is really a general purpose decentralized Oracle kind of network and framework that is initially being applied to price data for DeFi because that's a fast-growing space, and I would even like to think we can accelerate how fast it grows with the appearance of high-quality oracles and more data points with the help of great data aggregators like yours. And then after that, I think gaming, and after that, if I had to guess, I would say insurance. Those would be the 3 categories, which Chainlink is completely set up to support. In insurance's case, I don't think it'll be reference contracts because insurance has very specific requirements about a specific single piece of data related to a specific policy. And that's where something like market.link or other systems where you can define very clearly about a single input that you need, but maybe other people don't need. That's what we internally call the direct model. So right now we're doing very well on the reference data model where we're able to provide high quality price data to the DeFi contracts that want to be triggered off of that. Randomness is its own entire set of problems. And then the direct model is probably going to come from insurance where I want to make a direct relationship with some IoT sensors and nobody else wants that data. And that's something we've already discussed with a number of people, and there's things that are slowly moving towards production using that direct model, but once again, it's in an industry that moves slower.
Cool, very, very interesting applications. I guess that's all the time that we have for Q&A for today. I'd like to thank Sergey for taking the time to present to us and answering the questions that we have prepared for today. So I'll hand it back and move on to the next stage of foundation.
Great. Thank you very much, Bobby. Good chatting with you again. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.
Hi everyone. So I'm very lucky to be joined here by some of the smartest people in the crypto and the blockchain ecosystem. Some of the folks that are actually getting something built and knocking up against the real world problems of taking our collective industry and ecosystem into the next stage of its evolution by providing entirely new capabilities such as derivatives, lending, insurance, kind of really building the first iterations of what is in my opinion, going to be the next generation of smart contracts that will go on to define our industry. So I'm really excited to have them here with us, and I'm just going to ask each of them in turn to describe what they work on, what they've undertaken to make in terms of smart contracts, and then we'll go on to some interesting questions that I know a lot of people will find quite interesting and informative. So I guess starting in the order that we have folks here, if we can just kind of start with Kain. Kain, if you could tell us a little bit about what you're working on.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of Synthetix. Synthetix is a synthetic issuance platform. So we basically allow people to have exposure to synthetic assets on Ethereum. So we've got a number of synthetic assets that are available already today, commodities like gold and silver, equity indices like the FTSE. We've got a number of crypto assets, and we essentially use Chainlink, the Chainlink oracles, to provide those price feeds to allow people to get access to price exposure to those synthetic assets.
Great, thank you, Alex. If you don't mind telling us some of the great work you're doing.
Sure. So I'm with Celsius Network, and we invented this category of interest income. I know some people call it lending, but 90% of our 100,000 users are coming to us because we pay them interest every week. So we support 13 blockchains, 27 assets in total. So the rest of them are either tokens or other type of products. And we've been paying interest now for over 2 years. So if you look at the kind of like what we call the value stack, Bitcoin, the granddaddy is the store of value, king. Tether is the basically form of payment. It's 80% of the traffic on Ethereum these days. And we think the third product that everybody needs, and that is a utility that 7 billion people on the planet need, is interest income, because it's something that is disappearing from this planet. And the other 10% of our users basically also take loans against their assets. So if you have Bitcoin or Ethereum and you don't want to sell the coin, you can get a cheap loan from us and basically be able to use the cash and not sell the assets. So that's basically the utilities that we created. And we have about 600 million in assets under management, paid about $12 million in interest today to all of our users. That's more than all the DeFi guys put together. And we think that is how we bring the next 100 million people into crypto, right? They're all going to come for something like interest income.
Great, thank you, Alex. I mean, it's obviously a lot of success you've had in the approach you've taken. Hugh, if you don't mind telling us about all the exciting kind of next level stuff you're doing.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the founder of Nexus Mutual. So we're a people-powered alternative to insurance. Running on Ethereum, a DeFi platform, and our visions are to become an alternative to a large insurance company, but we're starting within the crypto native sphere, and specifically our first product is covering solidity code against bugs. So to provide a claim payout if there's a hack, like the DAO hack or the parity multi-sig wallet issues, or more recently the BZX hack. So we're there to provide a risk management tool for the kind of a new economy that we think is being built on Ethereum, and we think risk management and insurance is kind of a key part of that, as it is with any economy that gets built.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I think it's very exciting, and I think insurance has a lot of trust issues, and programmatic insurance that looks for actual outcomes in something proven, as it can be proven in your case, is really the next generation of that whole industry. Likewise with what Kain is doing, I mean, derivatives are the world's biggest market, arguably, and putting them on chain and making them work properly in that environment is just probably one of the biggest opportunities out there. And in Alex's case, I'm always massively impressed by the returns people get on his platform. So now they can have a large amount of cryptocurrency, which gives them all kinds of guarantees about ownership, and they can also get a return that's superior to the vast majority of banks and even professional asset managers, which I feel like you guys really exemplify for me that people that are kind of pioneering the next generation of what this technology can do. And so I'm really excited to ask you some more questions about how you're approaching that. So Alex, if you don't mind, I think there's some interesting new ideas that are around Celsius, around how you're planning to decentralize the project and how you're planning to approach the further decentralization of it, which I know we've discussed, and I think that's a fascinating question, which I'd be thrilled to hear hear your point of view of how you're approaching that.
Sure. So decentralization is first, a lot of people don't even know what that is. So go to Wikipedia and read about it. But basically, it's not a 0 to 1, right? It's not like a one step. It's a process, and we think that you almost need to have a bridge between centralized solution and decentralized solution, because a lot of stops along the way. Especially in our community, there's a lot of kind of diehards who think, no, we're going to go to 100% decentralized solutions overnight, and that's where the world needs to live in. But I think if we find ways to provide users the comfort that they used to in the centralized world, and then slowly move them across, it's really the better path. And that's the path that Celsius took, versus like the pure DeFi guys who just don't want anything to do with the old world. And when you have one leg in decentralization, one leg in centralization, you're caught in that middle, right? Because you can't rely on the old data. You have to rely on the new data from the blockchain. And there's no real bridges between the blockchain and the TCP/IP network, the internet, right? So part of the opportunity and the problem is really, okay, who are your oracles? Who are the sources of data that you can really have this machine-to-machine kind of communication and rely on them for delivery, right? I mean, before Celsius, I ran an IoT company, right? Novotel Wireless, with several $100 million in revenues, 1,500 employees, and I can tell you we had the huge problem there of oracles, right? Of basically how do IoT devices, and there's billions of them, right, rely on this data. So I think what you guys are doing in Chainlink, it's a brilliant idea. It's just I can't give you enough credit for not just coming up with it, 7 years ago, whatever, how long ago it was, but also sticking with it, and because I think you were way ahead of your time, sticking with it and waiting for the industry to kind of catch up with the whole concept that you can deliver this independent source of truth, and a whole industry can be built on top of that. So part of our move to transparency, just last sentence, is all about kind of showing to all of our users that, for just a simple example, when we price Bitcoin or Ethereum so they could buy it or exchange it or anything else, the source of data came from not just multiple Oracle, but also we acted in the best interest of our community. So it's transparency and the ability to prove that we weren't like an exchange that tried to manipulate the price or take advantage of you or anything like that. So a lot of opportunities there. And again, thanks for, we're really excited about our partnership with Chain. So.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. That's very high praise, and I appreciate it. I'm glad that we can help provide this transparency and reliability to your product and to your users, and create this environment where a system like yours that has so much value can become more decentralized at a lower cost, at a higher level of security. And I'm thrilled to hear that you think so highly of it. So thank you for your words of high praise. I really appreciate it. Now, I think there's definitely a lot of merit in what you said, but I think one of the people that have experienced already some of that themselves is Kain at Synthetix, and I know he's had a lot of experience with oracles, and he's experimenting now with the combination of oracles with various other systems that provide scalability to his product at Synthetix, and they're doing some really cutting edge stuff there. So Kain, would you mind telling us how is Synthetix evolving as a product that's achieved some kind of decentralization, and then it plans to maybe expand in its capabilities, or the role that oracles have had in that, or the role other systems plan to have in that. So I'd be thrilled to hear how Synthetix has really been expanding in its feature set while being in this decentralized state, in this decentralized form.
Yeah, so I think, just to echo what Alex said, my view and the approach that we've taken is that, adding decentralization to something that people want is what you need to do, right? If you start with something that's fully decentralized, there's a lot of kind of rigidity to that, and it can be hard to iterate and improve. And when you're building a product, you don't necessarily know what people are going to want, right? And so, the approach that we've taken was to start fairly centralized and to, as quickly as possible, decentralize the protocol. But there's other things that are obviously very critical, particularly for a derivatives trading platform. You need speed. There's a requirement for speed, and as we all know, that's something that there's a pretty big trade-off on Ethereum L1, compared to a centralized platform, right? It's probably okay if you're running a lending platform to kind of forego that potentially, but for a trading platform, for a decentralized exchange, it's pretty challenging. And so we're actually running a demo at the moment with the Optimism team of the OVM, which is a layer 2 scaling solution. We're running that demo with our own centralized Oracle right now, but obviously, talking to people in Chainlink about getting the Chainlink oracles migrated across there. And I think it's been a pretty eye-opening experience for a lot of people to kind of see, there's been a lot of promises about Ethereum scalability for a long time, right? And we haven't really seen kind of a demonstration, I guess, that could show how much the improvement would be, right, if you could add this scalability to the platform. And to see something like Synthetix, which is definitely hindered by the latency on Ethereum, and kind of unleashing that actual, scalability and showing people in real time what it looks like, has been pretty exciting. So we're super excited for that, and obviously, leaning into the scalability side of things as much as possible, because until we've got very low latency, price updates and oracles, it's going to be challenging to really take on the centralized exchanges, which is the ultimate goal.
Yeah. I can see what you're saying. I think we really need to achieve systems that both provide the feature parity and maintain the security of the smart contract and the blockchain and like all these guarantees that people come to our space for. So I think that's really the challenge of how do you create a certain feature richness while also maintaining all of these properties of security and tamper-proofness. And it's very exciting, the stuff that you're working on, and I think we have concrete plans to make sure that oracles are available in whatever environment you or other folks want to consume them in. And I think it's exciting that people are working on creating a number of solutions that allow people to basically incrementally decentralize and achieve the speed and the reliability capabilities that they want at the same time. So I think all of that is quite exciting. Now, I think while people do that, there's all kinds of risks that they take on, and so I'd be thrilled to hear from Hugh at Nexus Mutual about how he's seeing insurance playing a role in the growth of DeFi, and how he's approaching having that. What role do you see that performing in this exciting, fast evolving context?
Yeah, no, thanks. I think there's a whole lot of, one thing I've noticed is that I believe there's a whole chunk of money sitting on the sidelines that wants to get involved in DeFi, but is actually worried about the technical risk of various things or various risks of doing so. And it's perhaps more regular money, less kind of the crypto gambling mentality that a lot of we've got going around right now, which is great to get us all started. But if we're to kind of get to more mainstream stuff, we need to kind of manage the risks a bit better. And so hopefully we kind of can play a part in that and help out. At the moment, we cover the bugs in the Solidity code, but there are a bunch of other risks out there. I guess the recent MakerDAO events on I guess Black Thursday when the prices dropped dramatically, it's kind of highlights some of those things. At that point, the transaction fees on Ethereum went sky high, so scalability to like the really bad side, what could happen. And Oracle were delayed in actually getting the results on chain, which ended up with a whole bunch of things happening, and people lost some money. Our product at the time doesn't cover that stuff. It's just focused on Solidity code, and that's not where we want to be. We want to have much wider coverage, because anytime you kind of have something outside the system, there's additional risks involved. And oracles are one of those things. Obviously, the oracle providers could fail or be malicious or anything like that. And Chainlink's design is kind of really good at minimizing that type of stuff. But also the MakerDAO ones highlighted that even if the oracles are doing exactly what they have been designed to do. If the transaction fees spike, then they can't get the transaction through, and then people can't read the data on chain. So, there are other risks that people don't necessarily think about. And I guess just to get us to be more resilient and to get us to comfort levels that more regular people would expect, we need these kind of systems in place, and insurance is one part of that.
Yeah, that's very exciting, and I think that's something that there'd be a lot of interest in terms of even related to Chainlink and providing certain guarantees to users around the reliability of those oracles in various manners, whether it's staking by the oracles, the security guarantees of the infrastructure they run, their performance history, or in this case, insurance. So I think it's really next generation stuff that you're working on, Hugh. Is you're really making a form of cyber insurance that is like 3 steps ahead of the current forms of cyber insurance, because you're making it for an environment that can provide a lot of proof about what happened. And I think making insurance in that type of environment with a lot of proof is a very, very smart and useful and efficient thing to do, which I think can provide the types of guarantees that you mentioned. So I my kind of really impressed. My hats off to you. Is really impressed that somebody's doing this in a thoughtful way, as thoughtful a way as you are. Now, I think some of the other questions, and we've kind of touched on them briefly in this conversation so far, but in line with the title of how oracles are going to relate to the growth of DeFi, it might just also be useful to get everybody's measured opinion on how they think oracles will fit into the growth of DeFi, and how they see. How they've seen that either impact their plans to grow in DeFi, or how it's going to impact the growth of DeFi in general, like their availability or something like that. So I guess we can once again start with Alex and just get his feedback on how he sees the Oracle mechanism playing a role in whether DeFi will grow faster versus slower.
Yeah, so I'm old enough to have been there at the birth of the internet and was involved with voice IP, and when you kind of showed that capability, that's what we're using right now, right? They showed that to people, they were like, wow, this is amazing. And the conversion was like 100%, right? It was like a no-brainer, right? But when you try to get people to switch their money from the traditional world into the DeFi world, the bar is extremely high, right? And you have to do a lot of convincing to really, not just on the technical side, like we talked about before, that everything's going to work, but also that you know what you're doing, right? Because there's not enough players and not enough time has passed to show people that that you or others in the DeFi community know what they're doing. And so what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of early adopters kind of jumping in. They're all excited about this, but we ran out of early adopters. And the question is, okay, where is that army of hundreds of millions of people coming in with all the money that is sitting in fiat? And to get there, you really need to solve the trust issue. And you can solve it 2 ways. One is you can spend 700 years, like the banks did, of building beautiful towers with, marble columns and things like that, or you can be fully transparent and deliver something that no one has done before, like acting in the user's best interest, right? And to do these things, transparency and specifically proving to people, even if they're not technical, proving to them that every step of your process, every step of your execution is acting in their best interest. And it all starts with data. And we live in a world where some of the most successful companies in the world, these guys that told us, do no evil. Remember Google? That was their phrase when they started. Or Facebook. I mean, the people who brought you fake friends and fake news are now bringing you a fake blockchain, right? So you can't rely on any of these people. They all just thinking about how do we extend the life of centralization. They're not thinking DeFi. They're not thinking decentralization. So again, oracles are an extremely important piece of that puzzle, of that chain, and we have to deliver on all those pieces just to win the trust. And if you deliver on all the pieces, maybe you're going to get 10% adoption, right? So it's a very difficult task. It's not a simple task, and it's going to take us a while to get there.
Yeah. I think it's definitely something that's going to take a lot of effort and smart people to put together systems that allow consumers to really see a guarantee that they don't see in other places. I agree that it's competing against these brands, and I think that's a very high bar to meet. And either something happens to those brands where those brands start to fail in their guarantees, and that accelerates it, or like in your case, the returns plus the ability to prove extreme reliability starts to make it a no-brainer. So the risk hits near zero limits, but the returns are substantially higher, and therefore people switch over. But that proof does need to come into existence to overcome the skyscrapers, right? The big brand that basically says, "Trust me, I have a skyscraper." And yeah, I think that's a very, very thoughtful, accurate picture of things. So on this same point, I guess, Kain, you've been working with oracles now for many years. Actually, you've dogfooded a lot of the things related to oracles in ways that other people haven't, and I'm sure you have points of view on how there being more oracles or less oracles or better oracles or worse oracles, or how any of those dynamics would in your opinion impact either the growth of specifically the type of DeFi you're working on, or maybe through new markets or something, or the growth of DeFi in general.
Yeah, so I think one thing that people maybe was really obvious a while ago, and I think a lot of the enthusiasts and early adopters that are in the ecosystem have kind of forgotten, is that blockchains are disconnected from the rest of the world, right? They're a self-contained system. They don't care or know about anything outside of themselves, right? They're like a 2-year-old, right? They just know about themselves and that's it, right? And if you want to take all of this activity that's happening outside of blockchain and bring it in, you need to be able to tell the blockchain about what's happening, right? Or you don't, or you can try and recreate that activity from scratch in there and hope that people will just make this huge leap across this chasm into this system. But the reality is that people need some hand-holding, they need assurances, they need to have confidence in it. And I think that when you can take information from the real world and put it into this self-contained system to kind of connect it back, it can provide people some confidence, right? You can give them information that they're used to having, in these external systems, and bring them into the blockchain context, and let them use that to, provide new services or provide, functionality that they don't have in a more transparent way. And so I think that, for us, as you said, we've kind of been dealing with oracles for a long time. We want to have that system be as robust as it possibly can be, right? And so we don't want a system that is specific to our needs. We want a system that's generalized, that's scalable and extensible, and we want to be able to consume that service rather than try to recreate it ourselves. And so I think there's kind of this fundamental question of, do you take the real world information, do you bring it in, or do you try and recreate it, inside this little closed ecosystem? And obviously my view is, in the short term, until we can really build up what's over here in this blockchain context, we need to bring in the external information. And so, that's what Chainlink does for us, and that's what's allowed us to kind of scale up to having so many different assets, things like equities and commodities, and obviously, newer assets like Brent crude, for example, that we're working on, bringing all of that across to this new ecosystem and letting people interact with it is kind of the goal.
Yeah, I think you made one point that really also resonates with me and many other people we talk to, is that there's a certain level of complexity with building a decentralized infrastructure, and a lot of these teams are really, I wouldn't say limited, but every company, every technology company, even at medium to large sizes, is constrained in its technical resources, right? And I think the way that I've always seen people successfully build high-quality applications in the web world has been, they focus on building an application, and then they use infrastructure that other people built. They don't necessarily devote their limited technical resources to building infrastructure. Because if you do that, what I've often seen is people end up, in many cases, if they don't graduate to some kind of infrastructure provider, in many cases it's Ethereum. In many cases it's some blockchain that provides one layer of infrastructure, and then another layer of infrastructure is oracles. But the attempt to both make an application and rebuild 1, 2, 3, however many pieces of infrastructure is something that I've recurrently seen slow people down to the point where it's very difficult for them to be competitive, and often they realize it late. So I'm really thrilled to hear that you've been able to launch new markets, and that's something that I think that's really the good marriage between good infrastructure and good teams that make high quality applications, is those teams can now make as many great applications and as many features as they want because they have the right inputs, outputs, infrastructure to do that. So I'm really thrilled to hear that, Kain. The other quick question is also, how does how do oracles affect decentralized insurance? How do they enable that? How do they interact with with that category of DeFi. And, like I said, Hugh is one of the few people actually making very, very tangible progress in making decentralized insurance a reality. Hugh, I'm sure we'd all be thrilled to hear how you see oracles either growing DeFi or applying directly to the growth of decentralized insurance. I think it's a very exciting topic.
Yeah, I guess two angles, like kind of echoing Kain, with like basically the blockchain world is kind of separated, and like to build anything interesting, you generally have to take in some outside information. There are some things that don't, and you can do it with like economic incentive games and bringing stuff in manually and all the rest of it. Like I guess Uniswap is a reasonably good example there. But I think if you don't rely on oracles, then it's going to take us a lot longer to get there. And bringing everything on kind of natively, if you want to describe it that way, is going to be a long, hard research road without many users for a very long time. And some of those problems may not even be solvable. I mean, an example there is like you could use Uniswap as a price oracle, but it's not robust enough to do much with it because we've seen that it's been attacked multiple times or manipulated to attack other systems. So it makes sense, it completely makes sense to choose a much more robust solution right now. Maybe a native blockchain solution can work in the future for price feeds. I don't know. Theoretically, I guess it could, but we might be a long way from that. In terms of insurance, like to do anything with insurance, you need some sort of information outside the chain to tell you what happened. Is there a claim payable or not? And so you need some way to bring it on. And you can do that via oracles or voting mechanics or various things, but the oracles are going to be a key part of that, and with a whole bunch of different solutions. But if we're only looking at self-referential stuff on the blockchain, we're not going to get very far very quickly. So we need oracles and outside information sources on chain to use the benefits that we have got in terms of DeFi, of like automatically programming things in a trustless way, so people can be confident that they know what's going to happen with their funds. So it's a key part of how we're building, and I see it as very critical to actually speeding up adoption and getting users on with meaningful products.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Hugh. I think those are very astute points, and I particularly think that at this point there is some amount of price data generated in some kind of on-chain environment, but it doesn't actually represent the real universe of what actual price is. And I think the reality is, if you have any kind of oracle mechanism that doesn't provide market coverage, that doesn't properly cover all the places where price is represented, and doesn't cover all the places where price discovery could happen and where volume could shift, then you have a significant problem and actually a huge architectural risk. So I think at some point, years from now, far into the future, there could be enough data generated on various chains, and that data could be shuttled between chains in some meaningful way. But right now, still, and for years longer, I think the majority of data that people are going to want to actually rely on, that's going to represent the reality of a price or a claim or some kind of actual event, is going to be delivered from these off-chain systems. And the problem is, it's a chicken and egg problem. If you try to build products only within a blockchain data context, you don't build very much. People say, oh, you can't build very much in that context. Nobody else tries, and you're stuck in a land of tokens, which is a limited place for this technology to continue living. Whereas if you build using external systems, then the entire world of digital contracts is available to you to properly create derivatives like Kain is doing, or all kinds of things with interest payments, or even next generation insurance products. And so I'm really thrilled and gratified to hear that the work on oracles and the role that you guys see it playing is important. I think these have been some really thoughtful points that you've made. Unfortunately, we don't have longer for this panel. I feel like we could keep talking about this for another hour or two, and none of us would be tired from discussing it. I know I'd be thrilled to talk again about this more, and I'm sure once we're out of the bubble we all live in now, we can meet up and discuss it more. But I really appreciate all the thoughtful insights you've had, and thank you very much for joining us, and it's been a great conversation. Thank you.